Alright, so let's talk about how to get the long tube headers out, because you just had to have long tube headers. We'll start with the passenger side. So start by taking out the 6 header bolts that hold the headers to the heads. You'll get those 6 bolts out, and then there's one more support bolt that's all the way in the back off the bell housing that supports the end of the long tube header. Once you have all those out, you can pull the gasket out, and that'll give you room to move the header around. You still won't be able to get it out though. Eventually we're going to come out the top with the passenger side header. From there, that'll give you some room to get to the starter wires. So you take those loose. There's a positive, negative. There's a little lead wire, and then there's also a ground wire that goes to the engine block down here. There's a bolt. You'll have to get an extension with a swivel, and you can take him out. So once you have all those disconnected, you can get the actual starter itself out. Those 2 bolts come vertically from the bottom, so you have to come under the car again with an extension, and you can take those out. Those bolts will be in there pretty tight. How to use a breaker bar to break those loose. Be careful with it. You don't want to strip the threads or damage anything, but you will have to put some torque on it to get those bolts to break loose. At that point, you'll be able to take the starter itself down and out. You've got all your wiring out of the way, and then you can work the long tube header, like I said, out the top. You also want to take the O2 sensor, what would be the front O2 sensor, out of the end of the long tube header. That way you don't damage it, and you'll probably need the clearance getting it out. You'll also have to take the passenger side valve cover off to get clearance. I put it back on to keep trash from getting in by the valves, but you'll have to take this off as well to get clearance for the passenger side headers to come out. One more thing I'll mention, so over here on the passenger side, the oil dipstick tube runs up between 2 of the header tubes. So you have to take out a bolt that's right here. That's a little bracket that holds the oil dipstick tube to the side of the head, and then just lift up on it, and it'll pull out of the oil pan. There's an O-ring gasket down there, and it'll just pull out, but you have to take that out of the way before you can get the header out. One other thing worth mentioning, and I apologize that I failed to mention it, I recommend taking the spark plugs out before you start taking the long tube headers out. That way you don't break the porcelain portion of it, and make it that much more difficult to get the spark plugs out if you break one. So take those out first. Alright, so we're over here on the driver's side. Let's talk about how to get the driver's side long tube header out. The first thing you'll want to do, we're going to go out the bottom with this. So disconnect the clutch master cylinder hose that goes to the slave cylinder. So it's a quick disconnect. That's this one down here. You'll use a quick disconnect tool to press in the little plastic slide. That'll release the locking spring inside of it, and you'll be able to pull that apart. You'll want to have a rag handy. You will get just a little bit of brake fluid that will leak out when you pull that connection apart. But there's a valve in there, so it won't continue to leak, but you want to clean that up so it doesn't drip in your eyes. Then you have this engine block ground cable. It'd be tricky to get to it on the engine block itself, but you can get to it over here on the driver's side frame rail. It's just a little nut there that you can take loose. Once that's out of the way, you can kind of round it up, get it out of the way. Disconnect the wiring for the O2 sensors. Take out all 6 header bolts, and again you have the rear support bolt that's at the bell housing. Take that loose as well, and then it will take some finagling, but if you get the angle right, and as long as you got enough, you've got the car sitting up high enough, you can work the header out the bottom. It just takes a little bit of finagling to get it through, but you can get it out the bottom. So that's how the long tube headers come out.